Hello everyone, welcome to the Writing Room. I was going to do my next Raven's Writing Room on consistency in story and character development, but I've been getting a lot of questions lately about this topic specifically, so I want to address it now and just get it out of the way. One of the most common questions I get asked is how to create a believable, relatable, and flawed character. Now, I made a whole video discussing Mary Sue's and flawless characters and why they're a problem, but the ultimate question I think needs to be asked: how do you make flawed characters without ruining the character? And how do you make them natural? And I think that's a very good question to ask, and we will answer it by asking a very different question. Allow me to explain. When people think of character flaws, they often get caught up in tragic flaws, like from Shakespeare. Here's what usually happens. So you're writing your fanfic or self-insert story where your character's living the life you've dreamed of, right? They're defeating the villain, getting the girl or guy of their dreams, and doing it all like the hero you always envisioned yourself as. But then as you finish the story, you realize, oh crap, I wrote a Mary Sue character with no flaws. I need to give them a flaw. So you quickly try to write something in like, well, they're clumsy, or they're a little whiny, or they don't always win. And then you try to go from there. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that's just a simply lazy solution. I'm not saying that those aren't flaws that you could give your character. I'm saying they're missing the point of having a flaw. If you're just having flaws for your characters for the sake of having a flaw, just to say, hey, look, not Mary Sue, they have flaws, that's a problem. Here's the question you should be asking. What is holding your character back from reaching their potential in the story, and how will they as a character overcome it? How will they develop? You see, the reason you have flaws is because flaws are internal struggles your character must overcome in order to overcome the external struggles. Let's do a quick example. I'm going to compare two Disney movie scenes. One from the 1996 animated classic Mulan, and then I'm going to do the same scene, but from the 2020 live-action version of Mulan. We're going to look at the matchmaker scene and a little bit of the beginning of the two movies. So, let's start with the animated. In the animated movie, we get a solid glimpse of Mulan's shortcomings. We see her running late to meet the matchmaker, and she's scribbling notes because she's not good at committing things to memory. Either that or she put off memorizing these things.
Refined, poised, punctual. Aya!
We do see she's inventive by finding a creative way to do her chores quickly with minimum effort by having her dog do it for her.
Little brother! Little brother! There you are. Who's the smartest doggy in the world? Come on, smart boy. Can you help me with my chores today?
It shows both a character flaw, her lack of refinement and time management and willingness to cut corners to get the end result, but it also shows a positive character trait. She is a creative thinker. Now, from that, we also see a strong bond with her father. While her father wishes her to uphold the family honor, Mulan is more concerned about his well-being, lecturing him about not taking his tea at the proper times, that kind of thing.
Father, I brought you...
Mulan.
I brought a spare.
Mulan.
Remember, the doctor said 3 cups of tea in the morning.
Mulan.
And 3 at night.
And this shows her core motivations and what her priorities are. She only wants to impress the matchmaker today because it will make her family proud, not because she necessarily is seeking romance. All right. Now, as she's being called into the matchmaker, immediately, right out the gate, she's already doing things wrong. She speaks without permission.
Fa Mulan.
Present.
Speaking without permission?
Oops.
But it is from a well-meaning desire to start off on the right foot, showing a genuinely good-hearted woman, but who is clumsy, a little absent-minded, and maybe not quick on context clues. And when she enters the matchmaker's quarters, she has to read her lines from her cheat notes.
Fulfill your duties calmly and respectfully. Reflect before you snack. Act. This shall bring you honor and glory.
We also see that she's easily distracted as the matchmaker is talking to her and she's pouring the tea onto the table instead of focusing on what she needs to do, you know? She's so distracted by, oh my gosh, the matchmaker has ink on her hands that she's not focusing on what she needs to do.
Now, pour the tea. To please your future in-laws, you must demonstrate a sense of dignity and refinement.
Now, also, when the matchmaker has a cricket in her tea, she decides to intervene for the welfare of others, she's showing selflessness. But this also puts her at odds with those around her. She's trying to help the matchmaker by getting the cricket out of the tea without upsetting her, but the matchmaker's resisting, and so she keeps trying to resist rather than let the matchmaker kind of drink her own medicine, She is quick to act when in trouble, like trying to put out the burn on the matchmaker. When the matchmaker falls onto the coals, she tries to put it out with the fan, only to make matters worse. And so she finally solves the overall issue by dousing her with tea, ruining her meeting with the matchmaker, and that's largely due to her character flaws, her choices, and her shortcomings. But also, these are the same traits that will see her to victory later in the story as she overcomes them. They are clear things about her character that she has to work through and overcome, and some of them will actually help her. So, what are her flaws? Laziness, which we saw based on the fact that she was a little behind in getting the matchmaker, so lack of time management. Lack of refined behavior, she's very much clumsy. Absent-minded disposition, she gets a little sidetracked and distracted by things around her. She doesn't feel all that invested in what's going on, even though she knows it's important. And she has a willingness to cut corners to solve her problems, which she demonstrated by having her dog do the chores. And also because she wrote her notes on her hand. These are flaws. Flaws that she is aware of. Flaws that prevent her from being an ideal bride or daughter. What are her positive traits, though? Because she still has those. She's creative. She's quick-witted. She's selfless, wanting to help even at her own expense. And she has the desire to right her own errors. When she makes a mistake, she wants to try to fix it. This is a well-rounded character. And all of this ties into Mulan's motivations. She wants to make her family proud of her, but she doesn't know who she is or what she can do to win their pride. Her song after the matchmaker incident, Reflection, is one of my favorite songs in the movie, and it's about her being unsure who she's meant to be or what she's meant to do for her family. She is aware of her faults, but doesn't think her positives have any merit to counterbalance them. And we will see later in the story her working to overcome her faults. She overcomes her clumsiness through strict training to the point she fights Shan Yu and defeats him with a fan. She overcomes her laziness and willingness to cut corners by refusing Mushu's help throughout her training and trying to figure out how to improve on her own. She uses her creativity to solve the arrow on the pole riddle that Shang provides, which she uses later in the story to save the Emperor. Her character traits gave her what she needed to achieve her goals. She had flaws to overcome and goals to achieve. By overcoming her flaws, she was more prepared to face the external threat. That is character progression. That's character development. We see a character go from point A to point B, and we even have a moment of low point later in the movie where Mulan is meditating on this point, but we'll talk about that later. We talked ad nauseum about the original, and I love that movie, but let's talk about the new movie. Let's compare the new movie. In the new movie, Mulan's flaws are obviously not apparent. She's already incredibly skilled in martial arts at a very young age, gifted in the use of her chi, and spoiler, that's not how chi actually works. And even when going to the matchmaker sees no real problem with her. In the animated movie, the matchmaker was listing off her flaws right out of the gate. Here, she's saying that Mulan meets all the criteria.
Graceful, elegant, poised, polite. These are the qualities we see in a good wife. These are the qualities we see in Mulan.
It also isn't even Mulan who ruins the matchmaking meeting. In the animated version, Mulan's actions helped hurt herself before the cricket even got involved. Here, it was Mulan's sister and a spider freaking everyone out. When the panic sends all the tea utensils flying, it's once again Mulan's time to shine by using her inherent magical chi skills to catch all the falling utensils. She only fails because the hair ornament she wore fell in her face and she fell over. None of the failing at the matchmaking was because of her or her shortcomings. In fact, you could argue that it was because people tried to doll her up and make her something she wasn't that she failed. The character of Mulan in this movie is not allowed to be flawed. And because of this, we can't see what Mulan has to overcome or fix about herself. I have no concerns about her ability to face the main antagonists because I don't see any weakness in her character. She's already a prodigy. Why shouldn't she survive the story? Her only internal struggle is literally trying to hide how strong she is and how good she is at everything she does. And she's just bad at hiding her abilities. Seriously. Her character flaw in this movie is that she's too good at everything, and she has to pretend that she's not. Only to reveal the twist that she's not supposed to hide her innate perfection. Look, you're probably thinking, Raven, why are you bringing this up? Why is this a big deal? Because it addresses the reason characters have flaws in the first place. I see myself in the original Mulan. Clumsy, lazy, distracted, willing to cut corners sometimes. I see the realistic struggles she faces and how she has to address or overcome them. But I can't see any of myself in the new Mulan because she's quite clearly perfect already, something I am not and I can never be. Now, you could argue both movies have the same message. You're perfect and bring honor to your family by just being who you are. I think both movies try to push that message, at least to some degree. The difference, though, is that with old Mulan, she had things to be ashamed of and things she wanted to change about herself. So I saw the struggle and sympathized with it. But with the new Mulan, I don't see her struggle because she didn't change anything about herself. She started out perfect, tried to hide that she was perfect, and then ended perfect. While the old Mulan trains and overcomes her imperfections and finds her confidence, the old Mulan actually gets bullied, abused, beaten up, but learns and grows and gains her own place within the army. New Mulan simply has to be told to be true to herself, and that's not good. In every fight that she's in, she usually does incredibly well. You know, even when she's supposed to be training, where was the change in confidence? Look, characters have flaws because they aren't just overcoming the external foe, but their internal struggles, because we are imperfect beings. All of us struggle with some form of shortcoming. When we see the shortcomings in ourselves and the things we wish we could improve in our own behavior, lives, and decision-making, we can more easily recognize how to apply these shortcomings and flaws in our characters. Mulan in the original, by the way, admits she wasn't sure if she joined the army so much just to save her father, but to prove to herself she could be someone worth being proud of.
Maybe I didn't go for my father. Maybe what I really wanted was to prove I could do things right. So when I looked in the mirror, I'd see someone worthwhile.
That's not only realistic, it's understandable. How many of us have felt that same way? There is absolutely nothing wrong with applying real issues and struggles in your characters. It shouldn't be seen as a hindrance or a burden. You shouldn't look at adding flaws to your characters as, oh man, now I gotta weaken them, I gotta nerf them something. No, they're just another part of the puzzle that builds strong characters and their motivations, goals, and directions. Think about it like this. If your character is already perfect, they have no flaws, no struggles, no hiccups, I am less likely to be invested. I am far more invested in the character that is broken, trying to rebuild themselves, trying to make something of themselves. That is the character I care about and want to follow. The character who's already reached perfection, not as engaging. So I think the big question is, how do you do it? What are the steps? Well, there's no one step necessarily, but it's important to always ask yourself, how will your character achieve their goals and who will they become by the end of their journey? Proofread yourself. Are they going to change throughout the story? For example, Luke Skywalker started out as a wide-eyed, whiny boy from Tatooine. But when you look at the last movie in the original trilogy of Star Wars, in the last movie when he's dueling Darth Vader on the Death Star, when he throws away his lightsaber and says that he's a Jedi like his father before him, is that the same wide-eyed, whiny kid from Tatooine? Or is he grown? Has he outgrown his whininess, his immaturity, his childishness? This is a changed character. He had his share of struggles to overcome. He overcame them. It is always essential that when designing character strength, you recognize what these strengths will come to and what they're the cost of. Like, for example, if you have a character who is incredibly creative, perhaps that means they're lazy too. They're lazy because they can be creative enough to develop shortcuts to doing their chores, much like how Mulan used her dog to do her chores. Or maybe if you have a character who's incredibly intelligent, they might be a little arrogant, thinking they're better than everyone else, and they might have to learn to appreciate what other people understand that they don't. That was one of the things about Jimmy Neutron. He might have been incredibly intelligent, but he had friends who were knowledgeable and skilled in ways he was not, and he had to recognize that. There's other characters, for example, Saitama from One Punch Man is so powerful he can defeat any enemy in a single punch, but he's become so lethargic and cut off from reality that he's losing his grasp of humanity and starting to forget his emotions. He feels little anything, and it scares him to think he's lost a large part of who he is. In essence, he's gotten so strong, he's bored by it, and he sees hero work less about making the world a better place, and instead about curing his own boredom. That in and of itself is a fatal flaw for our character. He is slowly withering away and losing his humanity because he no longer sees any joy in living because he's gotten too strong. That's fascinating character. I think the reason people are scared to add flaws to their characters is because they think that by adding a flaw, it will make the character seem less impressive, or it will feel unusual or unnatural. But I think this is very untrue. Flaws help flesh out a character, so long as the flaws are believable, understandable, and they are ones that impact the character in their journey. Either these flaws will be overcome, or they will prove to be the character's undoing. One of the things that Matt CMG said in his video is he said that Mary Sue's win all their battles and have no flaws. I have to disagree with part of that. The truth is that a Mary Sue is a character for whom the plot always bends the knee. A Mary Sue can make mistakes and have flaws, but those flaws often serve to benefit the Mary Sue. For example, with the case of the new Mulan, her flaw is that she's so perfect and so amazing, she has to hide her perfection just to hide her identity. That's not really a flaw that impacts her negatively. For Rey, she is just so good-hearted, she is willing to help people without taking the credit. That's not really a flaw that impacts her in any meaningful way. Flaws should impact the character, maybe not debilitate them, but force them to think in ways that we wouldn't normally think. And also the flaws usually have to be ones that we recognize. Ones that we actually can say, you know what? I've seen this flaw before. I want to see how they overcome it and what happens to them when they try to. That is the key to making good flaws. That's the key to making a well-rounded character. Understanding that the strength and the flaws go hand in hand. And by having both, you have a well-rounded character. They must understand their strengths and use them to overcome their flaws. And if they don't overcome their flaws, then show how the flaw slowly consumes them, or they learn to own the flaw. There are lots of ways you can play with flaws in story writing. There are lots of ways you can play with shortcomings, because we all have them. If you provide a perfect character with absolutely no shortcomings, I'm not going to be invested in their story. If you provide me a character who has nothing but shortcomings and is nothing but a pile of, is just an absolutely cacophony of errors, then I'll find that entertaining, but I won't know how they're going to overcome it. It's a balancing act. And I think good writers proofread themselves constantly re-editing and redesigning characters over and over again until they find that balance. It's not a simple 1-2 step process. It's something that requires constant re-edits and redos over and over, and it takes time. You shouldn't rush yourself. Writing is not a quick thing. You should take time. Don't listen to Hollywood. Hollywood turns out movies in a year that should take a couple years to do. Okay? It takes time to create good story. It takes effort. Lots of effort and passion in what you're doing. A lazy person will create a character with no flaws because it's a self-insert character and say, you will love this character. I won't, probably. But a writer who's passionate about their work will create characters that are engaging, that are deep and complex, where I look at them and say, wow, I want to analyze who they are and where they're going. I want to figure out what works for them, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. I want to see how they overcome those weaknesses, if they will overcome those weaknesses, because sometimes the real intrigue behind a character is not whether or not they'll beat the bad guy, but whether or not they'll beat their own demons. Sometimes that's the key to making a good character. And I think that's all I really have to say on this topic. I know this was kind of short, but I really did want to answer this question. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Take care.